Royals, Page 6 is reporting that Meghan Markle felt humiliated on Prince Harry's most recent UK trip and that the trip turned into a nightmare, forcing Markle and her children to return home to California earlier than they had hoped. Kinsey, it's also been reported that Markle's frustrations came from the couple not receiving taxpayer-funded security and not being allowed to stay at Buckingham Palace.
And her husband lost big in court. No one wants to be seen on the arm of a loser. I think that this trip was a reality check. Harry has spent years insisting he can be half in and half out of the monarchy. And the British public just reminded him that isn't how it works, and if you look at the media that was generated while he was there, for the most part, he was rejected. And the nightmare wasn't just the trip. It was discovering that the privilege of royalty, doesn't automatically survive after you quit your job.
It doesn't. And that was, I thought, the reaction. It wasn't hostility. It wasn't hate from the British public. It was just disinterest, which I think they probably despise more than anything because they want attention. Before we move on, just quickly tell me about that courtroom loss. We haven't spoken since that came about. That was humiliating. It could be very costly for Prince Harry.
I mean, a 50 million pounds distributed between 7 people, including Elton John, including Prince Harry, Liz Hurley, some of the other high-profile individuals. They do have insurance, but if on the 400-page judgment where the judge says, I can't find the evidence to support your case, he does say some of these claims, there was a statute of limitations and they shouldn't have been brought to me. The insurance company could look at that and say, your attorneys should have never presented this in the courtroom in the first place, so we're not going to pay out this fee. I mean,
wow.
This really could be Prince Harry's most detrimental move professionally when it comes to how much he could owe the courts after this case.
Incredible stuff. Now,
it was supposed to be a homecoming. Instead, according to Page 6, it became something Meghan Markle is reportedly calling humiliating. A quiet reunion with the king. A very public legal disaster. A wife and 2 children who flew home early. And a husband left standing alone in a country that this week seems to have finally run out of patience with him. So what actually happened on Prince Harry's UK trip? And why are even royal insiders now calling him a fool? Let's get into it. On paper, this trip had everything the Sussexes needed. Harry was in Britain to front the Invictus Games, the one project even his harshest critics tend to respect. It was billed as a chance to rebuild bridges, and for a moment it looked like it might work. Because behind closed doors, something rare happened. A private audience with King Charles and Queen Camilla at Highgrove. No press pack outside, no photographers catching the cars arrive. Just a grandfather seeing grandchildren he reportedly hadn't spent real time with in years. Royal commentator Dickie Arbiter called it a smart move by Charles, the kind of gesture that, if it ever leaked, would be the last one Harry gets. A dad wanting reconciliation with his son, he said, whatever's gone before it. But here's the catch. William wasn't in the room. No reconciliation with his brother, no joint appearance. Just Charles, quietly, on his own terms, while the rest of the family, by design or not, kept their distance. Because while the Highgrove visit was happening behind closed doors, everything else about this trip was playing out in public, and not in Harry's favour. First, the security row. Harry has spent years fighting for armed police protection in the UK, and reportedly accommodation and security arrangements became a major sticking point on this very trip. The kind of dispute, Page 6 says, left Meghan feeling the whole thing had turned into a public spectacle. Then came the court case. Harry took on the publishers of the Daily Mail over phone hacking allegations and lost. Badly. 97 separate claims against the paper were thrown out. The judge's ruling ran to roughly 400 pages, and according to former Royal Protection Chief Dai Davies, every one of those pages ended up exonerating the very people Harry accused. Davies didn't hold back on air, calling Harry the author of his own misfortune, and questioning why legal fees on both sides reportedly ran as high as £50 million for a case that, in his words, shouldn't have eaten up that much court time to begin with. And then Harry did something that turned a legal loss into a political story. He went after the judge himself, calling the ruling a whitewash. That single word is reportedly what tipped two former UK Justice Secretaries, Alex Chalk and Robert Buckland, into publicly rebuking him, both saying that whatever his disappointment, attacking a sitting judge crossed a line he shouldn't have crossed. Here's where it gets personal. Somewhere in the middle of the security dispute and the court loss, Meghan and the kids, Archie and Lilibet, reportedly flew back to California early, ahead of schedule, without Harry. Sources cited by Page 6 describe her as frustrated, embarrassed, and done watching what was meant to be a low-key visit spiral into headline after headline about lawsuits and diplomatic snubs. Publicly, the framing is that she stayed supportive behind the scenes. Privately, per the same reporting, she said to have felt the trip made the family look like a punchline rather than a united front, which left Harry finishing the trip solo, fronting Invictus Games appearances with a legal defeat trailing behind him and his wife already back on a plane. And that's really the story of this week, the shift in tone. This isn't tabloids versus Harry anymore. It's former Justice Secretaries, former Royal Protection Officers and veteran royal correspondents all saying, in different words, roughly the same thing, that Harry keeps handing his critics the ammunition himself. Dai Davies put it bluntly on air. "Engage brain before opening mouth," he said, and argued Harry has repeatedly failed to do exactly that, from the establishment stitch-up comments about his security case to attacking the judge in the Mail case this week. Even the smaller stories are feeding the same narrative. A minor dust-up over Harry's comments about his own hair colour, read by commentators as him seeming touchy over nothing, became another 5 minutes of "why does he keep doing this to himself" commentary in the same news cycle. Individually, none of these is a scandal. Together, they're starting to look like a pattern the public is losing patience with. So where does this leave the Sussexes? The Highgrove meeting proves the door with Charles isn't fully closed, but everything around it, the court loss, the security fight, Meghan's early exit, the commentary from Buckland and Chalk, suggests the goodwill Harry needs from the British public is shrinking, not growing. And that's the real cost of this trip. It wasn't the visit that was supposed to repair things. For a lot of people watching, it's the one that convinced them the rift isn't closing anytime soon, and that Harry, once again, made it worse himself. So, was this trip a quiet win because Charles saw his grandchildren? Or a disaster because of everything that came with it? Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more on this story as it develops.
There is some good news for the couple. The Duchess, her Netflix program with Love Meghan, has received a Daytime Emmy nomination for Outstanding Lifestyle Series. To celebrate the nomination, Meghan took to Instagram and wrote a huge congratulations to the amazing crew, producers and team who worked on With Love Meghan. Kenzie, a daytime Emmy nomination. I mean, this may be a new low.
Well, this is a reminder that industry awards and audience enthusiasm are not always measuring the same thing. There's no question that more people watched TikTok parodies of With Love Megan than watched her actual program on Netflix. And, awards are interesting in Hollywood. Someone pays to be considered for a nomination in a category with no competition, and they get to boast that they're Emmy nominated. But one nomination or award doesn't guarantee a successful entertainment career, and it certainly won't turn around a reputation for being difficult to work with in Hollywood, which we know Meghan has developed.
Now, California Governor Gavin Newsom is set to reckon with his ugly past as his former mistress prepares for a sit-down interview with Vanity Fair. The interview will detail the tryst that rocked San Francisco politics, where Newsom was mayor at the time. That was what he did before he became governor of California. He engaged in an affair with Ruby Ripney Gibney, who was his appointment secretary and was married to his campaign manager and friend. Kinsey, so he was not only betraying his own partner, but also his great mate. I mean, what a guy.
Betraying his wife, he was allegedly betraying one of his closest political allies. That's a spectacular failure of judgment. Politicians always tell us character matters. Voters get to decide whether character still matters when it's their preferred politician. But this goes beyond gossip. It goes directly to questions of trust, loyalty, and judgment. This man wants to be America's next president and has the moral compass of Hunter Biden on a bender. I'm very concerned.
Well, I think Hunter did one better. It wasn't just his best mate who he was betraying. He ended up coupled up with his dead brother's widow. So, I mean, that's a whole new level. And he cheated on her with a stripper he got pregnant. I mean, that is a TV series in itself. Now, let's talk about Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt's children, Zahara and Maddox. They've this week published legal notices in California newspapers to confirm their intent to drop Pitt from their names. Kinsey, this comes after their siblings, Shiloh and Vivian, also publicly distanced themselves from using Brad Pitt's name. This split is ugly.
Yeah, one thing that stands out to me is the contrast. Brad Pitt seems to have thrown himself into work and largely stopped litigating this divorce in public. Meanwhile, every few months, there's another headline that keeps the family conflict alive. Fair or not, that contrast makes Brad look like the adult in the room. I've consistently found myself more sympathetic to Brad Pitt because he doesn't appear to have made this divorce his entire public identity. He's making movies, he's moving forward. The public narrative from the other side still seems anchored in a marriage that ended years ago.